All right, thank you for joining us. My name is Sean. I am the product manager here at Zyxel North America for our wireless products as well as our cloud managed products. Today, we're going to be talking about our Wi-Fi 7 access points. We've now got two of them available for you, so we'll go through those a little bit later in today's presentation. We're going to go ahead and start just by talking about Wi-Fi 7 in general, since it's still a relatively new technology and a lot of you out there are still learning about it. So Wi-Fi 7, what does it do for you? Um, Basically, it provides a lot faster speeds, up to 5 times the speed you get currently, up to 46 gigabits per second in theory or possible with Wi-Fi 7. It does that in part by doubling the bandwidth that can be used by a radio from 160 megahertz in Wi-Fi 6 to 320 megahertz channels in Wi-Fi 7. Although to note, 320 megahertz is exclusive to the 6 gigahertz band. The 5 gigahertz band can have access up to 240 megahertz channels. We've increased the encoding from 1024-bit QAM to 4096-bit QAM, which gives you about a 20% speed increase. And we've introduced a new technology called MLO, multi-link operation. So it can be used to allow client devices to simultaneously connect to multiple radios. And then you can use that technology to either aggregate your throughput across the different radios, or you can use it to reduce latency by sending the same data simultaneously across multiple radios, reducing the amount of rebroadcasts and resends you would normally get. So you can basically have a huge decrease in latency. So it depends on what your application there is. If you need speed, you can aggregate your throughput, or if you need lower latency, you can use it for that as well. So just to show here, this is sort of the timeline of the different Wi-Fi technologies that have been out there for a while here. You can see Wi-Fi 6 itself. The release for that was back in September of 2019. 6E released in January of 21, and now we have Wi-Fi 7. So a key thing here with Wi-Fi 7 is that the actual official release still hasn't happened yet as far as the IEEE spec goes, although we are in the later stages of it. I believe the timing is still officially, at this point now, I think it's shooting for early Q3. Early to mid Q3, I think, for official release, but it depends, how you define official. We're basically at the point where nothing is changing with it, but that is something to be aware of. The official actual approval for IEEE won't be until later this year, and there is a release 2. So similar to 11AC, where there was a wave 1 and wave 2, with Wi-Fi 7, there will be a release 1 and a release 2. So one thing I wanted to highlight here is this multi-AP coordination. So this feature right now is not something that's currently available on any of the products out there. This is going to be something that's going to be part of release 2. So when you're looking at online at some Wi-Fi 7 primers, you may see them talking about this. That isn't actually there yet now. And the other one here I want to talk about is multi-link operation. So multi-link operation is something that I believe currently is only supported by the Samsung Galaxy 24 Ultra. We support it with our Wi-Fi 7 access points, but we haven't enabled it yet. We're waiting for a few more client devices to come out that support MLO, so we can test with them and make sure everything's going to work fine without causing any issues. Current timeline to release MLO or to enable MLO on our access points is June or July this year. So we haven't enabled it yet just because there's only one device that supports it, and we're concerned about making sure it's going to be fully compatible with other devices and start adding support for it. So one of the key things here with Wi-Fi 7 is it adds a third radio. So traditionally, most of your business class access points have been dual radio, offering support of 2.4 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz channels. With Wi-Fi 7 and with 6E, we added support for 6 gigahertz channels. And the big takeaway when it comes to 6 gigahertz is that 6 gigahertz gives us access to a gigantic chunk of spectrum. It gives us more spectrum to play with in both 2.4 and 5 gigahertz. So that gives us a couple of advantages. The first one being, since you've got more spectrum to play with, you have less worries about interference with neighboring access points or neighboring Wi-Fi devices. The other thing, because there's so much bandwidth there, is we were able to, as we talked about earlier, able to increase the channel size that any device can use up to 360 megahertz per device. So it's a nice area for us to play with. It solves a lot of the issues with interference. Now, there are some shortcomings with Wi-Fi 6. First one being that the signal is going to travel less than Wi-Fi 5 or than 5 gigahertz. So as frequency goes up in the RF spectrum, the ability for that signal to go over distances is reduced. So if you're upgrading a network and adding Wi-Fi 7 or Wi-Fi 6E, you're not going to get full coverage without adding more APs as you upgrade that network. Just to be able to cover the same amount of area, because that signal isn't as good at going through and penetrating objects. So that is something to keep in mind. Another key thing here is 6 gigahertz. You cannot use a standard 6 gigahertz access point outdoors. There are different rules for using 6 gigahertz outdoors versus indoors. And the reason for that is because Wi-Fi or 6 gigahertz has been available for a long time as a licensed spectrum. Now, when it comes to indoors, you can deploy 6 gigahertz anywhere because the signal doesn't travel that far. But when it comes to outdoor applications, it requires special hardware that has been certified to be used outdoors at 6 gigahertz. And part of that certification involves the ability of the access point to work with a third-party service known as automatic frequency control, I believe, AFC, that basically keeps in mind, basically geolocates your access point as you deploy it, checks with the third-party database to see if there are any licensed Wi-Fi or 6 gigahertz users that exist in that geographic location. And then it will either remove channels that you can use when you're operating your AP, or it will reduce the power that you can use on those channels to make sure you are not interfering with those licensed users. So basically, when you're outdoors, you're sharing 6 gigahertz with existing 6 gigahertz customers. So they get first priority because they've paid a license to use 6 gigahertz. And then your unlicensed 6 gigahertz products, such as your Wi-Fi 7 access points, can use whatever they're not using in that area. So we'll talk a little bit here about multi-link operation. So basically, up until this point, with Wi-Fi, all the way through Wi-Fi 6E, has been what we call single link operation. Basically, your client device will connect to the access point. Your access point probably has dual radios, so the client device will connect to one of those two radios, either the 2.4 or the 5 gigahertz radio, based on the configuration or signal strength of where that client device is in relationship to the access point. So with multi-link operation, your client device is able to simultaneously connect to 2 or more of the radios in your access point, and then it can either take the data that needs to be sent and send it across multiple streams on different radios and aggregate it together for a faster overall throughput. Or as I was talking about earlier, you can lower your latency by sending the same data over multiple radios. So with Wi-Fi, we're in a noisy, lossy environment. Packets have to be rebroadcast, and that causes latency issues. So by sending the same data over 2 or more radios, if, say, for instance, the 5 gigahertz radio gets some interference and causing those packets to be dropped, those packets can still come through on the 6 gigahertz, so they don't need to be rebroadcast, thereby lowering your overall latency. So based on what you need to do, multi-link operation will provide either faster speeds or lower latency. There's also a technology called multi-RU puncturing. So this is something new in Wi-Fi 7. And basically what it has to do with is it's going to be most beneficial probably in your 5 gigahertz channels, where you're using 160 or 240 megahertz channels. Because there's only there's only 260 megahertz channels available in 5 gigahertz or one 240 megahertz channel. So if you're in an environment where you have other devices that are also using 5 gigahertz, but at slower speeds, we can basically take that 300 or 240 megahertz channel or 160 megahertz channel and basically not broadcast on a portion of it, allowing the other legacy device to continue using its channel. So your AP won't interfere with the legacy AP, and you'll still get pretty darn good speeds through it with this multi-RU puncturing. So this is just sort of a timeline of what's been going on. So probably one of the areas, and this has been true for Wi-Fi history as far as I know, the client device support for new Wi-Fi technologies lags behind, um, the AP and router technology. Generally, when a new technology comes out, the first place you're going to find it, and this is absolutely true with Wi-Fi 7, was on consumer routers. And the reason for that is there's a lot more motivation to be first to market with a new technology, but also because consumer products generally don't support all of the features that are part of the new standard, that have to be supported for business cases and business users. You guys use a lot more of the specifications of the Wi-Fi standard than the consumer products do. So that was true there. And then now when it comes to client devices, the first client devices we started to see were late last year. So late 2023, we saw the Google Pixel 8 and 8 Pro. They have support for Wi-Fi 7. And then the Galaxy S24 Ultra supports Wi-Fi 7. The Galaxy S23 had a chip that could be upgraded to support Wi-Fi 7 via a firmware update, but I don't believe Samsung has yet released that firmware, at least as far as I know. But that may be coming. But so right now you've got basically, just a handful of phones that can support Wi-Fi 7. The iPhone just added 6 gigahertz support in the most recent release, the was it iPhone 15 last fall, but only 6E support, not Wi-Fi 7 support. So for Wi-Fi 7 support, that will probably be coming, we're guessing, in 2025. We think that Apple's going to probably wait for release 2 of Wi-Fi 7 before adding support. So whichever model of iPhone comes out at the end of this year probably will still be 6E only. We'll have to see. And we're starting to see some, if you need the performance, some PCI cards that can support some really fast speeds when it comes to Wi-Fi 7. So let's talk about our products. We have 2 access points that are Wi-Fi 7 based. The first one I want to talk about here is our NWA 130BE. This has a street price of $179.99. This is the cheapest option currently out there for those of you looking for Wi-Fi 7 from any manufacturer. So this is a Nebula Flex access point, so it can be used as a standalone AP, or you can manage it using our free Nebula Cloud. And it has basically all the features you would expect from a Zyxel business class access point. Um, so it supports Wi-Fi 7 at a speed rating of BE 11,000. So 11 gigabits is the Wi-Fi speed you can expect. And just like with other Wi-Fi products, this speed that is measured here is based on the IEEE standard, which includes all data, including all the protocol overhead and stuff like that. So real world throughput, Wi-Fi client to Wi-Fi client, is probably going to be somewhere around 40 to 60% less than that. It supports all of our latest Wi-Fi 7 features. It features support for WPA3 Enterprise, etc. We have the filtering in there, which separates out and helps prevent interference from cellular DAS systems that may be sharing the same building with your access points. Excuse me. It is a rectangular design specifically to create greater isolation between the 3 radios to help prevent interference or EMI between the different radios. So you will start to see that with most of our tri-band products are going to be either a square or rectangle, because it provides better separation than round access points usually do. It has a 2.5 gig uplink port. So you've got a multi-gig uplink port, but that's obviously going to be your choke point when it comes to wireless to wired data speeds. But 2.5 gigabit there. And it supports standard 802.3 AT PoE. So your existing PoE switches Unless they're really, really old, we'll probably support this without any problem. And then like many of our business class access points, we offer a second 2.5 gig Ethernet port that is an outflow port. So you can daisy chain one cable to this access point, power it up with PoE, and then you can have a second cable come out of this and go to some other port or device in that room to help reduce some of the cabling you may need to do. And it uses what I'm going to call our standard mounting bracket design here. So this has been designed specifically so it can be mounted to just about any type of outlet box or junction box, either round or rectangular. And then it also works with our optional T-bar accessories. So you can mount this directly to the T-bar on a drop ceiling. With a little animation here play. And again, if you have any questions, send them in using that question and answer part of the Zoom interface. And once the access point has been mounted, it is locked in there. You need a screwdriver or chopstick to help release it. This is specifically done to make it hard for people to steal the access points. Probably not a big concern in most office environments, but if you're using these in a hospitality environment, that is absolutely something that happens more often than you might think. And just like all of our business class access points, this follows our RF first design. So our antennas are not mounted onto the PCBA. They are on their own separate board with a shield between the main board and the antenna board to create better isolation and reduce EMI issues. We have that 4G, 5G cellular interference filter for those of you that are deploying these in buildings that use a DAS system. And of course, like all of our other business class products, there are no electrolytic capacitors in there. And we've specifically designed the housing to help pull heat off of the main board and vent it out of the unit to prevent heat fatigue over time. And this AP here supports our CNP Plus service. So for those of you that don't know, our access points, we have an optional license you can buy that enables IP reputation filter service that provides UTM light features to help block, phishing websites, malicious websites, things like that. So that is an option there for you in situations. We have had customers that really like this. When the customer already has a router that doesn't offer UTM services, they don't want to replace that router. Maybe it's something provided by the ISP. Maybe the customer just doesn't have the budget for it. So this is a way to provide UTM light services to wireless users on that network. We often see people using this license on public hotspots in the public part of stores and locations like that. And it also supports dynamic pre-shared key and NAT, the ability to do NAT on an SSID basis. So we see users using these features a lot of times in MXU environments to be able to provide unique access to the network for those in individual units in that MXU. So Joe has a question here. Is the AP backwards compatible with Wi-Fi 6E? And the answer to that is yes. Wi-Fi 7 access points are fully backwards compatible with all previous Wi-Fi standards, including 6E. So your 6E client is going to be able to connect to that 6 gigahertz radio, no problem, and going to be able to get full 6E speeds. Well, that was weird. Sorry, I thought I'd removed all animation. Apparently there's animation that went through those backslides. Let me go back and see if it'll actually let me display the slides. So this is our other access point. This is the WBE 660S. There we go. So this is our flagship AP now. So this guy here is currently available for a street price of $499. $599 if you look at the price sheet, but $499 is what we've got the sell-in price to distribution based off of. So you should be able to offer this at either $499 or $599 with some decent margin if you're one of our partners, part of our partner program. This had been a lot more expensive than that. This initially, I think, launched at $899 or $849. So be aware if you first looked at this and said, ooh, that's too expensive for me, the price has come down quite a bit. We also are offering NFRs on these, so you can get some in your hands for even cheaper than that if you want to play around with them. But this is going to be our flagship Wi-Fi 7 access point, the WBE 660S. So this is a Nebula Flex Pro product, so it can operate standalone. It can be managed in our free cloud. It can also be managed by by the wireless LAN controller that's built into our security appliances. So if you don't want to use the cloud and you're deploying a lot of these, you want to use local management through one of our controllers, you absolutely can with the WBE 660S. This guy here is a BE 22,000 class radio. So basically 22 gigabits is the total Wi-Fi wireless to wireless user speeds that are theoretically possible with this access point. This has our smart antenna technology built into it, and I have a couple slides talking about that for the two of you out there that haven't heard it a million times yet. And also, of course, has that advanced RF filtering to help block out 4G and 5G signals from DAS units inside buildings. And just like all of our other devices here, this is a RF first design. So you will notice here again, our antennas are on their own board that is separate from the main PCBA, giving us better separation. We've got a ton of shielding on the main board itself to help prevent EMI issues, to provide that 4G, 5G filtering functionality, and just to create better isolation between our antennas and the main board itself. And like all of our business class products, there are no electrolytic capacitors, only solid state capacitors are used. And if you flip this guy over onto the back, you will notice that the back of this device looks different from our other APs. So this back helps provide anti-noise shielding, but it's mainly there as a heat sink. The chip that's required to be able to provide 22 gigabits of throughput puts off a lot of heat. So we've got a large metal back with fins there to help radiate that heat out of the back of the unit to help prevent heat fatigue and extend the life of the access point itself. Now, to power this guy, because of how powerful it is, you do need an 802.3 BT PoE. So that's the PoE++, as Tri likes to call it. It's the PoE standard that can provide up to 60 watts of power. So just be aware of that. If you have an existing 802.3 AT PoE switch, it will power up this device, but it won't operate at full speeds. You do need BT for full speeds. Obviously, we'd be happy to sell you a new switch that provides BT power to power these up. We do also offer BT PoE injectors if you're just doing one or two of these guys. And you probably want a new switch anyway, because this guy here has 10 gig uplink ports. So you probably want a 10 gig connection to help, allow as much of that Wi-Fi speed through to your LAN network. But if for some reason you don't want to upgrade the switches today, but you do want to start deploying these access points as a future proof, another option we offer for you on this model is the ability to power the AP via a standard USB-C PD power brick. So basically the same type of power brick that's used to power up a laptop or power up some of the new higher end phones will absolutely also work to power this guy up here. It just needs to provide up to 45 watts of power through power delivery USB-C. And then of course we've got a 1 gig pass-through port on this, so you can daisy chain this to another device in that same office or room. And it uses a slightly modified version of our standard mounting bracket that's been designed here to be able to work with both round and rectangular junction boxes, as well as work with our T-bar adapters to be able to mount this up onto a ceiling using T-bar clips. So all of these access points are handled by, or can be managed in Nebula, and that's probably what most of you are going to be doing. For those of you that aren't familiar with it, Nebula is our cloud-hosted management platform. We were the first company to launch a cloud solution aimed at SMB. This has been around since 2016, so it's been there for a while for you. So we do other webinars every month talking just about Nebula. So if you haven't played with Nebula yet, join one of those webinars and learn a little bit about it. And you can always at any point go to nebula.zyxel.com. We've got a live demo there that you can play with. Daniel is asking a question here. Do we have an ETA on 1900 or 2200 series switches that can power above a dozen of these APs? And I do not know the answer to that. I am sorry about that. Try is our switch product manager, and I am not up to date on the timelines for all the new switches that are coming. So I do not know the answer for that. Um, I would suggest, assuming you're one of our partners, reach out to your salesperson, ask them that question, and they can relay it to Try to get an answer for what the roadmap may be for those. So I'm going to talk really quickly about smart antenna. It's in a lot of our different webinars we do, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on it. But basically, your typical access point has a single set of antennas in it that are optimized to broadcast in what we call an umbrella pattern. Basically, it assumes you're going to mount the AP on a ceiling, and it radiates the signal outwards and downwards from that access point to cover the area underneath it. Smart antenna technology, our smart antenna technology would be similar to Ruckus's BeamFlex Plus. So if you're familiar with Ruckus's BeamFlex Plus, a very similar technology. And what it does is, instead of using a single set of antennas, it uses an antenna array, which has the ability to use hundreds of different antenna patterns. And it can optimize the antenna pattern for each individual client, even moving clients, as they connect to the access point. And the benefits of smart antenna technology are basically the reduce interference. So both interference that may interfere with the signal coming from the client device to the access point, but also help reduce interference between different access points. The increased coverage, so smart antenna should give you a little bit wider range than non-smart antenna products. And in theory, it also helps reduce power consumption. So just to show real quick, here's your typical access point, radiating out in a circular pattern. You've got a source of noise or interference, and it can cause clients to lose their connection. So with smart antenna instead, we have the ability to go through hundreds of different antenna patterns to choose not only the best antenna pattern for optimizing the signal going to the Wi-Fi client, but also to help us ignore sources of RF interference, so we can ignore them. So if you've been through our Wi-Fi 101 webinar, if you haven't been through our Wi-Fi 101 webinar, when we do that, we do a case study using in-room hotel access points, and we can get airtime utilization up above 140%. So basically more than the theoretical maximum of 100% when using multiple APs on the same channel using smart antenna, because the smart antenna reduces that the interference between APs versus non-smart antenna access points where you're limited to, a little bit less than 100% airtime utilization. So it's a great technology that works just fine with Wi-Fi 7 and helps provide even just better usage of performance of the access point. So where would you want to use Wi-Fi 7? Obviously, one reason to use Wi-Fi 7 is a lot of customers, they're only upgrading their networks every 3 to 5 years, maybe even more than that. So if they're buying a new Wi-Fi system, they want to make sure it's going to be able to serve their needs for the next 5 years or more. So that's the latest technology today. It provides fantastic throughput, fantastic features. So if you have customers wanting a new install and wanting to be future-proof, now's the time to start deploying Wi-Fi 7. Some specific applications for Wi-Fi 7. One of them is high-density locations. So again, locations where you've got either a lot of users in the area or you've got a lot of access points in the area. So it makes it ideal for like hotels, office buildings, conference centers, expo centers, things like that. And the benefits are coming both from just using 6 gigahertz. So you can, there's a lot less interference there, but also some of the technologies that are built into 6E and into 7 are specifically designed to solve some of the interference issues that have been a plague of Wi-Fi since the early days. Other areas where you may want to use this is being able to deploy access points in areas where you don't want or can't run Ethernet cable. So mesh has been a big thing in the consumer side of Wi-Fi for a while to be able to easily provide coverage around a house, but generally the performance hasn't been good enough to use it in the business space. So with Wi-Fi 7, that really sort of solves this issue because you can use that 6 gigahertz radio to provide the backhaul link between the different nodes in your mesh. And then your 2.4 and 5 gigahertz radios are free to only handle client traffic. So it reduces that latency you would normally run into with a dual radio setup. And by offloading to 6 gigahertz, you solve a lot of those interference issues that you run into when trying to deploy mesh in a business situation. And then also just the faster speeds anywhere where you need those faster speeds. So, one of the things that causes latency and delay when doing video conferencing or live streaming is the video has to be compressed before it gets sent out over the network, because the bandwidth isn't there. So with Wi-Fi 7 now, there's enough bandwidth that you can send raw HD video over the Wi-Fi network without needing to compress it first, thus reducing latency between what you're recording and what you're seeing. And then also we've talked about before about the low latency issues, low latency benefits here that you can use in multi-link operation. So in the future, that's probably going to be a big deal for those of you trying to provide voice or two-way video over Wi-Fi. It'll solve some of those latency issues and some of the drop packet issues that have plagued voice over Wi-Fi all this time. And with that, guys, we're done with the webinar. So most of our webinars, including this one today, are recorded, and then we upload them to our YouTube channel. So you can find that at Zyxel America channel on YouTube. There's a bunch of different Zyxel channels on there because we're an international company. So just Zyxel America channel is for stuff that's done here in North America. In addition to recording our webinars, there are also some best practices videos. There are video case studies. There are commercials. So there's a lot of other content in there that you can find if you dig through it. And then feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn. We are there as Zyxel US channel. So any questions that haven't been asked yet, go ahead and send those in using the question and answer interface. I'll keep talking here for a second while waiting for some questions to come in because there are currently none there. But I do want to also draw your attention that we do now have user forums, and you can get to them really easy by going to forum.zyxel.com. We've got a consumer side and we've got a business side. So these, like other vendors, are designed to allow you to talk to other people that are using and deploying Zyxel equipment. But in addition to that, these are also monitored by our R&D and product management teams. And occasionally they will weigh in to respond to questions you may have on there. Not always, but they will. But they do keep an eye on that to see what sort of features people are looking for and where demand is. So, your comments and participation there help shape what features we're going to focus on going forward as far as improvements go. It's also one of the best places or first places you're going to find security alerts, release notes, and things like that. So check it out. Okay, I don't have any questions coming in, so I am going to go ahead and end the webinar. If you did have something you want to ask, just go ahead and email it to your sales rep, Andy, David, or Jacob, and they can answer that question or forward it to me, Tri, or our sales engineer, Marcus, to answer it if they don't know that answer. So thank you for turning out. I hope I see you at one of our other webinars. Thank you.